The footsteps outside the cabin door were trying too hard to sound normal, and that told me everything I needed to know. I am Daniel Hart, and my only job on this ship is to keep Princess Elowen alive. She sat across from me with a data pad in her hands, 4 violet eyes scanning lines of text, completely unaware that her evening was about to fall apart. "Elowen, get away from the window," I said, already crossing the room. She looked up, confused for half a second, then trusted me the way she always did, without asking why. She moved. I counted the footsteps outside, not 2 or 3, many more than that. Careful, spaced out, trying to stay quiet in a corridor that was never built for quiet. I reached the door and slid it shut, then locked it with a hard turn that echoed through the small room. "How many?" she asked, her voice steady, though her hands were not. "More than I would like," I said. "Stay behind me." The lights above us flickered once, which meant someone outside was already trying to cut into the ship's control systems. I had maybe 30 seconds before they found another way in through the vents, or the emergency panel beside the bed. I moved fast. I pulled the small case from under the table, the one I always kept close no matter where we traveled, and opened it. Inside were 2 compact stun devices, a signal jammer, and a short length of cable I had used before, in situations exactly like this one. "Talk to me," Elowen said. "What is happening?" "Someone wants you gone before the treaty signing tomorrow," I said, working quickly. "If you disappear tonight, the alliance falls apart before it even starts. That is worth a lot of money to the wrong people." "How many people are we talking about?" "I counted 20 sets of footsteps," I said, "maybe more, waiting outside the ship." Her breath caught, but she did not panic. That was one of the things I respected about her most. Panic gets people killed. Calm thinking keeps them alive. I clipped the jammer to the wall beside the door, which would stop anyone from remotely unlocking it through the ship's main system. Then I checked the vent above us, the only other way into the room, and wedged a metal bar across it so it could not be pushed open from outside. "You built all of this into my room without telling me," Elowen said, half amazed, half annoyed. "I built this into every room you sleep in," I said. "I did not think you needed to know until tonight." A sound came from the corridor, low and mechanical, followed by a hiss, as something pressed against the door from outside. I grabbed Elowen by the arm and pulled her toward the far corner, away from the door, away from the vent, into the one spot in the room that had no direct line of sight from either entry point. "Whatever happens," I said, "you stay right here. You do not move unless I tell you to move." She nodded, and for the first time since I had met her 3 years earlier, I saw real fear behind her eyes. Not for herself, I realized. For me. The door groaned as something pushed against it from the other side, testing its strength. I stood between Elowen and that door, my heart steady, my mind already 3 steps ahead. "They expect an open room," I said quietly. 20 people against 1 target, with nowhere to hide. That is what they planned for. That is not what they are going to get. What did you give them instead? "A narrow hallway, and a door that only opens wide enough for 1 person at a time," I said. 20 against 1 sounds terrifying, until you realize it only ever becomes 1 against 1, 20 separate times. The door shook again, harder this time, metal groaning under pressure. I could hear voices arguing outside now, low and frustrated, realizing their easy plan had already become complicated. "Daniel," Elowen whispered, "if this goes wrong." "It will not go wrong," I said, cutting her off before that thought could finish forming. "I have done this before. Not exactly this, but close enough." The door finally gave, sliding open just enough for 1 shadow to step through. I moved before the shadow finished stepping, closing the distance in 2 strides, and using the stun device against the person's shoulder. They dropped instantly, and I pulled them fully into the room, using their body to block the doorway for a precious few seconds. "1," I said, mostly to keep my own thoughts steady. Another shadow appeared, smaller this time, moving faster. I caught their wrist before they could raise whatever tool they were carrying, twisted it away, and used the second stun device against their side. They folded to the ground beside the first. "Two," I said. Elowen watched from the corner, silent, her hands pressed against the wall behind her. I could hear her breathing, quick and shallow, but she stayed exactly where I told her to stay. That mattered more than anything else in that moment. A third figure tried to rush through the gap all at once, clearly done with careful planning, choosing speed instead. I stepped sideways, let their momentum carry them past me, and used their own forward motion to send them straight into the wall beside the door. They slid down, dazed, out of the fight before it even started for them. "Three," I said. The doorway went quiet for a moment. I used those seconds to check the vent above us, still sealed, still holding under the metal bar I had wedged across it earlier. Whoever was left outside was rethinking their approach, which told me they had not expected this much resistance from one person. "How many are left?" Elowen asked quietly. 17 if my count is right, I said. But most of them just watched 3 of their people go down in under a minute. That changes the math for them. A voice called out from the corridor, calm and controlled, clearly someone giving orders rather than following them. I could not make out every word, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone trying to convince the others to keep pushing forward despite what had just happened. "They still think they can win this through numbers," I said. "Can they?" Elowen asked. "Not if I keep controlling where the fight happens," I said. "As long as this doorway stays narrow, their numbers do not matter. They can only ever send one person at a time, and I only have to win each of those moments once." Another shadow appeared in the doorway, more cautious than the last 3, clearly aware of what had already happened to their companions. I let them take one full step into the room before moving, using the doorway's narrow space against them exactly as I had used it against the others. 4, I said, my voice steady despite the effort behind each movement. The corridor outside had grown quieter, voices dropping to whispers I could not quite catch. I used the pause to glance back at Elowen, who gave me a small nod, silently telling me she was still fine, still steady, still trusting the plan even as it unfolded in real time in front of her. "They are regrouping," I said, "which means they finally understand this is not the easy job they were promised." "Will they give up?" Elowen asked. "People rarely give up when they are being paid," I said, "but they might get more careful, which actually works in our favor. Careful people hesitate. Hesitation is exactly what I need." A 5th figure appeared, moving slower this time, clearly testing the doorway rather than rushing through it. I waited, letting them commit fully, before stepping forward, and ending their attempt the same way as the others, quick and controlled, no wasted movement. 5, I said. The silence that followed stretched longer than before. I checked the small monitor built into my wrist device, showing the ship's internal cameras along the corridor outside. What remained of the group had pulled back near the far end of the hallway, clustered together, clearly debating their next move. "They are talking about retreating," I said, reading the tension in their body language through the small screen. Whoever hired them did not pay enough for this much trouble. Elowen let out a breath she had clearly been holding for longer than she realized. "Is it over?" "Almost," I said. "But we wait until I am certain, not until we hope we are certain. Those are very different things." We stood there together in that small room, the 5 figures on the floor beginning to stir slightly, as the stun effect started wearing off, though not nearly enough to cause more trouble. Outside, the remaining group finally began moving away from our corridor, their footsteps growing fainter with each passing second, retreating toward wherever they had come from. I waited a full 2 minutes after the last sound faded, before finally lowering my guard, checking the corridor camera one more time to confirm it was truly empty. "It is over," I said, turning to face Elowen fully for the first time since the door first shook. For tonight, at least. She crossed the room and hugged me, something she had never done before in 3 years of traveling together. You knew this would happen. You planned for this exact moment. I plan for every moment, I said. That is the only way to keep you alive in a job like mine. Thank you, Daniel, she said quietly. Get some rest, I said. Tomorrow the treaty gets signed, and after tonight, I think everyone will understand exactly why that treaty matters so much to the people trying to stop it. She smiled, tired but genuine, and finally sat down on the edge of the bed while I began securing the room once more, resetting the jammer, checking the vent, preparing for whatever tomorrow might bring next. Outside, the ship settled into quiet, and for the first time in nearly an hour, I allowed myself to breathe easily, knowing the door had held exactly long enough.